How are you guys doing?
Good.
Good. I am Stephanie Olson, and I am with Set Me Free Project. And we are an organization that's all about prevention and educating youth and families. That's really our focus. And so we go into schools and we talk to the kiddos, middle school, high school, college too. We're actually finalizing our elementary school curriculum. But we talk to them about the dangers of human trafficking, social media safety, things like that, so that they can really know what it is. I think probably there's several issues with human trafficking that are so, problematic. But one of them is that our kids don't realize they're at risk. And so one of the things we do is really talk to them about how they're at risk and how they can keep themselves protected, and then we talk to families and things like that. So stop me at any time. I like to be very interactive, and I love being in front of cameras. That is my favorite. I hate it. Oh my gosh. Can I just tell you, I love being in front of people. Once there's a camera there, do you guys remember the Brady Bunch show where Marsha, it was Jan. She was on the Brady Bunch and the light turned red and she froze. Do you guys not remember that? Yeah, exactly. Classic episode. So, yeah, just need you to know where I am with the whole camera thing. But stop me at any time because I like this to be very interactive, a lot of questions. We are also very excited to have Alicia Weber here with us, and she is with the Nebraska Human Trafficking Task Force and the Salvation Army. I always say this wrong, so I need to. Salvation Army's Fight to End Trafficking Program. I always add extra words in that. So, and she's going to be talking a little bit about victim services. So we're going to try and get that prevention and victim services piece just really nailed down for you. So ask questions. I would love to hear a little bit, just very quickly, about what you guys do. If you can, would you mind just introducing yourselves just so I know where you're coming from and just going through and letting me know what your wheelhouse is? Well, thank you everybody for coming. This is such a difficult topic to tackle, but we can't tackle it individually. This is something we have to be collaborative about. It's something we have to work together about. It's not about building kingdoms, but it's about working as a team and fighting this head on, because we can do it. We just have to do it together. And you guys are doing great work. I appreciate what you're doing. And it's just so important that we connect and fight this as a team. So thank you for being here. All right. So, and I also always have, let me just tell you, my best presentations ever, I always go to the wrong location first, which I did. So you got that going for you. And my thing never works. So whatever. You guys are in for a treat. That's what I'm telling you. Okay. All right. So what is human trafficking? I think that is the key, because there's a lot of misconception about what human trafficking is. And until we really nail it down, we don't know what to look for. Once we know what to look for, we're aware of what's happening and we see it everywhere. So what is human trafficking? In its simplest form, it's modern day slavery. That's what it is. It's modern day slavery. It is actually the biggest form of slavery we have seen to date. I mean, that's a massive statement. That's a really incredible statement, because we've seen incredibly horrific forms of slavery in our time with mass amounts of people. This is the biggest to date, which is just a scary thing to say. It's the force, fraud, or coercion of a human being with the personal profit or gain of another, with limited freedoms, limited to no pay or compensation. That's what we're talking about. Now, there's a lot of legal definitions as far as minors and adults and things like that, but force, fraud, or coercion are the key words. If there is force, fraud, or coercion, and when we're talking about something like sex trafficking, we're talking about prostitution, pornography, commercial sex acts, things like that. Sex trafficking is what we typically talk to the kids about, because that's what their highest risk is here in Nebraska and Iowa. And so we see a lot of that, but we also see a lot of labor trafficking. We'll talk about the forms of trafficking in a little bit. But force We know what that is, fraud, deception, but it's that coercion piece that is so used in trafficking. There are not a lot of physical chains, it's so mental. And we see that a lot with abuse, we see that with domestic violence, we see that with a lot of things. With trafficking, it's a combination of all of those, and there's layers upon layers upon layers of trauma that is taking place in a victim of human trafficking. And so that is one of the biggest problems. I think one of the biggest problems in Nebraska, and this is what I'm going to have Alicia speak to, is the need for victim services and people who are trained to deal with trafficked victims, because it's so different than treating somebody with domestic violence or sexual abuse, or because the layers are so intense. Now, hope you can see this. Action, this is what we see. We see recruiting, harboring, transporting, or obtaining a person by means of force, fraud, or coercion. That's how it's done. And the purpose, and this is actually not even an exhaustive list, but involuntary servitude. So labor trafficking, where they're paying a debt. They are forced to work for little to no pay. You see even something as simple with labor trafficking. Have you ever seen those kids going around with tubs of stuff, and they're dropped off in your neighborhood first thing in the morning, picked up lap? Those are usually trafficked victims. And so they're told these massive, dreams. This is what you're going to get if you do this. If you're paying off a debt, or you're whatever it is, I'm going to give you this. And they come and tell you, well, if I sell you this much, you're going to help me achieve my dream of. Well, they believe that at times. And so a lot of times they're kept in little small hotel rooms. They're beaten if they don't make their quota. So that's something that's happening right in our neighborhoods. Slavery, it's all slavery. Sexual exploitation, organ harvesting, military service. So that's kind of what it looks like as a whole. Global illegal industries, and this is changing so often because it's a very fast-moving industry. They're very good at what they do, and they move very quickly. Drug trafficking, still number one, but not by much. Human trafficking, as far as global illegal industries, is just number two. Now, what happens a lot is that the drug traffickers are also human traffickers. They hang on to the drugs because, yeah, they're profitable, but not only that, they use the drugs as supply for their victims. And so that's something that they're going to hang on to. With drug trafficking, you need a consistent supply. With a human, you can sell them over and over and over again. So as far as profitability, human trafficking is so much more profitable. Sex industry alone is a $99 billion industry. That's huge. 51 billion with labor. So those two, in and of themselves, is a $150 billion industry. And that changed just within the last few years from a $32 billion industry, the sex industry. So it is huge. Stop me with any questions whatsoever. Oops. Yes. So, common myths of human trafficking. We'll talk about this a little bit, and I think this is critical because we have this perception of what trafficking is. I think the first myth stops even at girls. I don't even have to go past girls. Girls are, bless you, girls are victims of human trafficking. Girls are victims of sex trafficking, and that's it. We don't see boys trafficked. Well, that is an absolute myth. Boys are absolutely victims of trafficking, and it's really important in the prevention piece. I think we hear so often about girls being trafficked, about girls being victims, and they absolutely are. But when we're talking about prevention, we don't recognize that boys can be victims, we get kind of comfortable with the fact that they're not going to be victimized. And so they are at huge risk. And so this is one of the things we talk to the kids a lot about, we talk to parents about. Boys are absolutely at risk and oftentimes bring in a higher price point. And so what do you think is the average age of girls entering into prostitution? 12 to 14. Who said that? Rock on. 12 to 14. You're absolutely right. What about boys?
I would say younger, 10.
It's 11. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a sick and twisted, scary thing. Girls who are prostituted have glamorous and fun lives and earn lots of money. Julia Roberts, all over the place. You know, she finds Richard Gere, and they rescue each other, and it's just a great romantic time. Clearly not accurate. Prostitution is one of those things that is full of victims, and that's hard for us sometimes. We get that when it's kids. I think we can see victims in kids, but when it's adult victims, it's harder to see them as victims. But victims of human trafficking are beaten when they don't make their quota. They don't earn a dime. They are absolutely forced to do this. But, and I will have these arguments, and you can go back and forth and you can debate all the time. And people say, well, what about those who choose to be prostitutes? I don't think anybody chooses to be a prostitute. The majority of trafficked victims will tell you they are doing it by choice. The majority of trafficked victims do not recognize that they're victims. But if you were to look at any prostitute, any madam, anybody running a huge brothel, my guess would be at some point there has been in their life victimization. And so they are victims, victims, victims. I truly believe that. No U.S. citizen are trafficked, only very poor international immigrants. Obviously, we know that's not true. U.S. citizens are absolutely victims, and we'll talk a little bit about Omaha as well. Trafficking victims must be transported from place to place. That's something we often think, and that, you know, they are, well, it's the movie Taken. We think about the movie Taken, right? When I say to kids, so tell me, define human trafficking for me, almost every one of them that, God bless this little kid, I had a kid tell me it was the guy standing out in the middle of the street directing traffic. It's like, oh, I wish that's what it was. But I have so many kids say, well, it's when somebody is kidnapped and sent overseas. And that's what we think so often. It's the movie Taken, and that can absolutely happen. But that's not what's typically happening here. And so it is important to understand that they don't need to be transported. In fact, a lot of victims are victimized right here, sold right here, sometimes in areas right around here. Some victims are sold right in their mom and dad's home because mom and dad are traffickers. Some situations, it's happening right under mom and dad's nose because they're not aware of the situation. And so it's so important to understand that it can happen right in our homes, right in our schools, right in our neighborhoods. Forced bodily restraint must be present in trafficking. I think that's more mental, probably the mental chains. And if a trafficking victim consented or agreed, one time they're not a victim. We see that a lot with adult victims, and that's kind of what I was talking about. If somebody's been victimized at 5 years old, that's easy for us to see them as a victim. But if somebody's victimized at 35 years old, it is so much harder for us to say, well, they didn't make that choice on their own. So, absolutely. Any questions about that? Okay. This statistic is fascinating to me. According to the International Labor Organization, 52% of trafficking recruiters were men, or are men, 42 are women. And that in the prevention side of things is so critical because we often have this perception, and when we're teaching kids, you know, stranger danger and all of that stuff, stay away from the big, I ask the kids all the time, tell me what a predator looks like. Well, a predator is like that creepy old guy, old like 30, you know, and wearing a trench coat. That's what they think half the time. And I cry a little bit when I hear old is 30, but that's, you know, that's kids. But if 42% of recruiters are women, that's an incredible, that's a coup. I mean, that's a huge thing that those traffickers are doing to get kids, because they're taking the people that they trust intrinsically and they're turning them into recruiters. But recruiters are also kids too. And so it's so important to see that these traffickers are men, women, kids. More women are involved in the trafficking industry than any other crime. I think that's fascinating. And they're often used as lower ranking to, you know, they'll put women on the front lines. I only had 1 cup of coffee today, so it's really important I get my second or I'll start yelling at you guys or something like that. I don't want to do that. All right, types of human trafficking. Sex trafficking, this is what we know about most. We hear about labor trafficking. These two are probably the biggest forms of trafficking happening in Nebraska, happening in Iowa. This is what we see most often. Infant trafficking. So we see this with black market adoptions, but we also see infant trafficking with organ harvesting. So when we're talking about organ harvesting, that's adults, that's children, that's infants. Child soldiers, we see that most often overseas, and now senior citizens. Big market that's increasing in senior citizens. And so we see this with sex trafficking. A lot of times, now a lot of the senior citizens are going to be people who might not have a lot of family, maybe home health, and so people come in, they're vulnerable, they're sold right in their own home. I mean, it's horrible stuff. There was a case where a nursing home was busted. The trafficker was actually a resident, selling residents in the nursing home. And so we do see an increase of this. But the other thing we're seeing with senior citizens are predatory guardianship. And again, often with senior citizens that don't have a lot of families, so we're seeing a lot of that happen as well. All right, identity of location. So every city, every state has an identity of location. We actually have 2 in Nebraska. We can be a place of origin, which is where the victims are taken from, transit location, where they're transported through, and destination location, where they're brought. So what do you think we are here in Omaha? Destination location. You know what? We in Nebraska, and we love Omaha, we believe that Omaha should be a destination location for everything. We think, come here on vacation, live here, yes. We're not a destination location. I don't want to burst our bubble, but we're not. Florida, destination, Arizona, you know, that's where people want to go. We are, however, a destination location a couple times during the season in Omaha. What are they? College World Series. What else did I hear? Berkshire Hathaway. And now there's a new one. Swim trials, yes. We are a place of origin and a transit location. Now, Omaha is actually a hotspot for human trafficking, which is so scary when you think about what, you know, we are the good life in Nebraska. Are any of you from Iowa? Okay, so talk to me. So I asked this to every Iowa person, no one knows, okay? So we are in Nebraska, we're the good life. What are you guys?
I don't know.
You don't know, right? I've heard some really scary things out of Iowa people. You need to come up with a slogan, okay? Come up with a, yeah, but you're a good place to live. So we're the good life, we're a great place to be. And so we have this perception. So what are the reasons Omaha and Iowa, Nebraska as a whole, Iowa, why are we hotspots? Interstates, huge. We're attached to 2 great big interstates, and that is great for what we use the interstate system for, but it's also a great place to traffic drugs, humans. why else do you think, and I can't prove this, I can't give you any statistics, but why else do you think that we are a hotspot for human trafficking?
We're nice.
We are so nice. Yes, we are. We're very nice, we're trusting, and we are, and even though, Iowa, you guys don't know what your name is or your tag, you're nice people,
Yeah,
right? Cab drivers, nice people, yes? Okay, so, no, I'm just kidding.
Probably true.
But that is so important to recognize. And when we talk to parents, we are so trusting. And there is this mentality sometimes, oh, I got my kid to middle school. Whew. You know, my job is done. They're in high school. Okay, now they're driving. I'm fine. That's, you know, we have this mentality that we are such a great place to live and nothing bad happens here. We are a great place to live. But there's a lot of bad here, and you guys know that. I don't have to tell you guys that. You see it. But I think that traffickers take advantage of the vulnerable. They go after the vulnerable, whatever that is, whether that's somebody who is on drugs, whether that's somebody who's been sexually abused, whether that's somebody who is, you know, needs love and whatever that is. But it can also be somebody who's vulnerable that posts on social media. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. My mom is a bleep because they just got in a fight with mom. And all of a sudden somebody swoops in and builds a relationship with that little girl or little boy and starts to groom them. And so that's, vulnerability can be a number of different things, but vulnerability can be, we don't recognize as a community how dangerous our community can be. And so traffickers can take advantage of that. Questions? Okay. All right, so according to National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and this has been updated actually. I just heard from Megan Malik, who is the Women's Fund of Omaha, but she works with the Nebraska Human Trafficking Task Force, and she said she just saw that it's now 1 in 5 in 2016. So 1 in 6, it says runaways, were likely sex trafficking victims. So now it's 1 in 5, up from 1 in 7. So it's just increasing. 68% of runaways were in foster care when they ran away. So now huge, huge vulnerability target are kids in foster care. They say that up to 80% of kids who have been trafficked have been through the foster care system. I mean, that's a huge, huge statistic. There's also a statistic that statistics with trafficking are really hard. There's not a lot of data out there, but they change, they go away. Statistics, you know, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens with statistics. There's a statistic that said about 1 in 3 runaways have been approached by a trafficker within 48 hours. So once they're on the streets, they are so vulnerable, huge high risk. And Omaha has a huge homeless youth population, and so they are definitely at risk there. So I have a video that I would like you guys to watch. And this is a video that was, they did a, Diane Sawyer did a piece on, and I'm totally blanking on the name of it. It started with B. Anyway, you'll hear it. But this is just a snippet of it. It was an hour-long show, and it's just valuable information. But I'm just going to show you like 4 minutes of it or something.
Closely, these women are in fact not criminals, but hostages walking among us.
I love that video because it's such a powerful video. It shows the dichotomy of what happens. That beautiful girl at the end who was saying, "Get away from me." Well, yeah, I want your number. You know, it's that conflict that's going on in her head because she wants out, but she doesn't know what to do. And that's what's happening to these beautiful kids. The only thing that I catch about this video that, again, bothers me is that focus on girls. And did you notice the focus on the demand part? Who is buying these girls? men, right? Men are buying. But that's not true. That is true. Men are buying these victims, but it's not just men. And so it's so important to know that the demand, and we'll talk a little bit about demand and supply, the demand is the people who are buying sex, the people who are buying porn, the people who are participating in this, but it's not just men, it is women too. And so that is really critical to know as well. And this can't be, and I fear sometimes that when we're talking about trafficking, this is poor women, bad men, and that's the message that gets across, and that's not the case. Men are buying, but so are women. Men are victims, so are women. Traffickers are men, so are women. I mean, it's a human problem. It is a human problem. My daughter used to say when she was little, she's 15 now, and she would put on her socks and then put on her shoes. It was when she was learning how to put on shoes, and how, I have a picture of her when she's 1, and this was my mom's fault, not hers, but she has her shoes on the wrong feet, and so her shoes are like this. And when she was learning to put on shoes, she was trying to learn the right and the left, and she would always say, socks don't care. And I love that, because socks don't care. You can put it on any feet, socks don't care. But that's really, trafficking is the same thing. It doesn't care. It doesn't care whether you're a man or a woman or a boy or a girl. Trafficking doesn't care either. So that's so critical to recognize. This is a slide, and I actually have this back there. I've got some material back there for you to feel free to take with you, but it breaks down what we're looking for in a trafficked victim. And when it comes to strangers, they're going to be disoriented. These are people you don't know, maybe you see them in a medical setting, maybe they're coming into your environment for whatever reason. They're not going to make eye contact. Oftentimes they're not alone. They're going to be with their pimp. They're going to be not able to communicate on their own. They're going to be fearful, agitated, hyper-submissive. They're not going to carry personal ID or information. A lot of times if you ask them, give me your address, they're not going to know. Or they're going to make something up because they're constantly moving. But if it's somebody that you work with, somebody you know, a friend, a family member, what you're looking for is a little different, because you know these people. Maybe they have excess cash on them that you think, where in the world did you get that? Hotel room keys. Who carries hotel room keys? But maybe you'll find them in their handbag or in their backpacks or whatever. Abrupt change in habits, attitude, speech, apparel. This looks like drugs, though. This looks like a troubled teen. And so it's learning to ask the questions behind the questions. Because if you ask somebody, are you being trafficked? They're going to say, no. But if you ask somebody, tell me about your boyfriend. Tell me about that mentor that you have, that woman that is with your family a lot. Tell me about your relationship. Tell me about where you went last. Oh yeah, tell me. Now, and we've worked with a lot of organizations that have to ask questions, medical questions. Tell me about how many sexual partners you have. Well, if you ask how many sexual partners have you had in a year, that's harder to gauge. I mean, I can answer like that, right? But not everybody can, and so that's harder to gauge. But if you ask how many sexual partners have you had in a week, that's going to be that's going to look very different than something longer term. Or what was that question, Cindy? How many, I put you on the spot. How do you spend your money? How do you spend your money? So you have a job, tell me, how do you spend your money? What? I don't get to keep my money. That'll indicate a situation that's not okay. Presence of an older boyfriend or girlfriend or mentor. Frequent absence from class or work. So these are kind of the signs. And I'm going to have Alicia speak to who you talk to and who you can call. But this is the National Trafficking Hotline, Polaris Project. And that number is, they actually make it easy to remember, and I didn't write it that way, but 888-3737-888. So it is an easy number to remember. But that number comes to somebody in Nebraska. Is it you? Do those?
Yeah, it's not us
Okay.
It says still goes to the Salvation Army, and I think the WCA will also.
Yep, okay, good, so,
Taking these calls?
yes, yeah.
So good
Yep.
to know, thank you. Okay, very good.
So, any questions on this? All right. Some of the things to look for in a potential victim is branding. So a lot of pimps will brand their victims. If you see a barcode, instant, I mean, that is a clear sign that they're being trafficked. Sometimes the branding will be hidden, and so it's not gonna be something that you see right away. Sometimes it'll say something, or you see similar brandings, it'll say, you know, it'll be more of an ownership, so the pimp will say Johnny's, you know, hoe or whatever, and so you'll see that on several girls. So branding, it's hard today because a lot of us have tattoos, and some of us put tattoos, names of our boyfriends, or I don't recommend that unless you know you're staying with them, because a tattoo is hard to remove. But, you know, this is harder, but we see this is a big sign of branding. All right, medical signs. Now, this is a lot of times traffickers are going to do quick fixes. Talked to a medical group not too long ago, and there's, she said one of the biggest things that they see are girls coming in with tampons that are stuck too high, because that's what they do to stop the bleeding so they can continue to sell the girls, or specifically the girls. I was going to say or the boys, but that's not an issue with the boys. So, so you'll see some unsanitary fixes, a lot of infections with stuff like that. Tampons, or they'll use cotton balls sometimes, and so, you know, obviously things that can be a lot of healthcare issues there. And age-inappropriate familiarity with sexual terms or practices, that looks like sexual abuse. So a lot of it is so intertwined, but really hard. Yeah, again, it's asking those questions behind the questions. Questions about that? Well, I'm going to have Alicia Weber come up. She is with, as I said, and I wrote it down here for you, Nebraska Human Trafficking Task Force and the Salvation Army to End Trafficking Program, SAFE-T. So we are excited to have Alicia here to talk to you a little bit about what she's doing in the victim service end of things.
So first of all, a little bit about me. I have a master's in social work, and am working on my provisional LMHP at the moment. And I've been working with survivors, female survivors of sex trafficking that were adults for the past 3 years now, doing case management and therapeutic services for individuals who are in the Wellspring program. So if you're not familiar with that, that's the Salvation Army's longstanding, it's been around for 25 years, service to men and women who are escaping a life of prostitution or sex trafficking, case management, peer support, and therapeutic services. So it's always a service if you're looking for referrals, especially when you're looking for therapeutic referral. We're here for that. So October of 2015, the Salvation Army and the Nebraska Attorney General's Office were awarded a combined Department of Justice grant. Ours is through the Office for Victims of Crime, theirs is through the Bureau of Justice Assistance. So with that, it's called the Advanced Collaborative Model to combat human trafficking. With that, we developed the Nebraska Human Trafficking Task Force. That is a statewide task force that we're currently working to kind of build and get up off the ground and spread throughout the state. We have 6 different regions we're working in across the state that are comparable to Nebraska State Patrol regions. So we have a operational component where we're doing operations out of like hotels, motels, doing preemptive investigations, because we know that if we just sit around and wait for people to self-identify, we're never going to have a client. We're never going to find somebody. We're never going to get somebody out of their situation. So those preemptive operations. So we're hoping to roll out training across the state in probably August, September. to really get law enforcement trained on how to work with these victims or survivors, and also to integrate a multidisciplinary approach, which is very important because we don't always play well in the same box together. We don't always talk to each other, and sometimes we feel that we have very different philosophies, when really we're all just trying to stop trafficking, just going about it in different ways. There's also an administrative component to the task force. So we have the advisory group, which is mainly made out of the heads of really big law enforcement agencies, and also the Salvation Army is kind of the lone voice in the wilderness right now as far as services, but hoping to get a few more service providers on board with that. And then we have a working group and different subcommittees working on special issues related to trafficking. So that includes including the faith communities, outreach in the schools, not just with the children, but also educating educators and anybody in that school system on how to spot trafficking. We're also looking at training tools, assessment tools, so hopefully once we have those formalized, we can get those out to you all. Different screening, pre-screening, and really essentially what are we doing with a human being when we find them, right? So that's kind of a little bit about the task force. Hopefully you'll hear more and more as we really start to formalize. Our regional task forces are not yet up and running, but once we do, Douglas County will probably have a very active one because this is where the population is. This is where we're expecting a lot of our cases. So the Salvation Army has actually been working with trafficking survivors nationally and internationally for a very long time. I mentioned the Wellspring program. We've been around for 25 years. We didn't call it trafficking 25 years ago, but we know that we were seeing a lot of people who had been exploited with sex trafficking. So we have been running this same grant out of Las Vegas for the last 10 years and Chicago for the last 8 years. So we have a really, really good track record of running these grants. And also it's kind of important for you guys to know that we're not just creating our own model and hoping that it works. We do have long-standing programs to back us. We are borrowing / stealing a lot of their different paperwork and different ways of doing things. So we have a leg up where we can really learn where it worked and didn't work for those agencies. I think we're the second in the Salvation Army's network to try and go statewide. So we understand that's going to be a little different and present a few different challenges, but up to the task. So with the safety program, like I said, I was officially hired August 15th. We didn't actually receive our federal funding until February of 2016. So we're really just hitting the ground running now. We are 2/3 of the way staffed. We're hoping to hire our last person in North Platte probably within the next couple of weeks. We're just waiting for background checks. But Chris in the back here, she is your trafficking specialist for the Omaha metro area, and also Lincoln, basically, we're calling her kind of the southeast person of the state. So she'll be involved in, right now, networking with everybody to try to create a really good, comprehensive case management network that we can work with in order to refer and get a lot of needs met. Because we know not every agency, no one agency is going to be able to handle all the different needs of a trafficking survivor. They're just not. We definitely need people to rely on who can add their specific expertise. And then if we need to do some technical assistance, some training, if you guys ever need to call and run a case by us, that's what we're here for. So please feel free to use kind of us on that. So Chris is doing that right now, really trying to get the network established in the Omaha and Lincoln areas. In August, we're going to be open for referrals, so we'll be able to actually start our intensive case management process with clients. And that 888-3737-888, we will have a hotline linked to that phone number. So we'll have somebody on call 24/7 who is able to answer that phone. But again, it's all going through that phone number. Normal business hours, you can absolutely call one of us as well. You don't always have to go through that hotline, but after business hours, we prefer you use that hotline.
And what would be the number to call during normal business hours?
My phone number is on the back here. It's 402-898-4768. And Chris, do you have a phone number yet? Or are you still-
I will look it up because I don't know my number yet.
We had a slight issue with IT, like giving her somebody else's phone number. So, but also our main office number is 402-898-6090. So if you're having a hard time getting in touch with somebody, you can call and ask to just speak with whoever's in the office.
Okay, so mine that you can call is 402-639-0077.
And then again, we do have a trafficking specialist in, she's office out of Grand Island, but is really doing central and also the northeastern part of the state, so Fremont, no, you have Fremont, but Norfolk, Schuyler, that area, all the way across Valentine. And then we'll have somebody in North Platte as well covering.
Alicia will be sticking with us to
Yeah.
answer any questions at the end too, so,
And we'll be here afterwards too, so
yeah.
anything you can do, yeah. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you, Alicia, I appreciate it. I want to talk a little bit about the kiddos here because this is a lot of what we need to, because our target that is being victimized is young, middle school, high school. And so I want to talk about a little bit about what they need and some of what we talk to these kids about. Stranger danger. Now, stranger danger is one of those that we say to the kids, so tell me what you learned in preschool. Go way back to preschool. And what did you learn? You guys be middle schoolers here for me, really quick. What did you learn about stranger danger? Don't take candy from strangers unless it's Halloween and then, have your mom check it or whatever. What else did you learn? Don't talk to strangers. What'd you say?
Don't get in the van.
Don't get in a van, especially a white van. That's right, exactly. So here's a joke. Tell all the kids. Actually, a kid told this to me. So what kind of shoes do kidnappers wear? White Vans. Okay. Yes, so stranger danger. Yes, we know all of that stuff, but is it really about stranger danger? Because what do we tell kids in foster care? We tell them you're going to meet a stranger and you need to trust them.
Yeah.
You're going to meet a stranger and you need to trust them. And you're going to meet this stranger and you need to trust them. So we're telling kids all the time, you're going to meet a stranger, you got to trust this person. So it really can't be about stranger danger, right? It's got to be, how do you know who is a trustworthy person? How do you know someone who is trustworthy? And this is something that we all need to know too, right? A trustworthy person, because predators or traffickers, they're all going to seem very trustworthy at the beginning. I will ask the kids, tell me what a trustworthy person is. And they will say, a trustworthy person is someone who is nice. Okay, but is a predator going to be nice? Absolutely. They will actually say a trustworthy person is someone who dresses well. Wow, okay, but is a predator maybe going to dress well? Yes. Can a trustworthy person run to Target in sweats and hope nobody sees them? Yes, so it can't be based on those kind of things. So what is a trustworthy person? Well, there's a defining line in a trustworthy person. A trustworthy person, because a predator will look trustworthy, a trustworthy person will look trustworthy, but the defining line becomes this. A trustworthy person will always want the best for you. Always. They will always want the best for you. A trustworthy person will never ask you to do something illegal, and a trustworthy person will never ask you to do something immoral or that goes against your moral compass. Now, all of our moral compasses are a little different, so how do you determine that? Well, if there's somebody who is trustworthy and you say, a person says, hey, would you, and you say, ooh, I'm not comfortable with that. A trustworthy person's going to say what? Okay, I totally respect that. And so that's what we need our kids to understand. It's that healthy, unhealthy relationship thing. And it goes beyond, traffickers, goes beyond it. It goes just to a relationship. In an abusive relationship, they will ask you to do things that go against your moral compass. Or that say, gosh, so it's teaching them that consent. It's teaching them to say no, and it's okay to say no. And it's okay, tell everybody. I talked to a couple of survivors the other day, and they said if there was one thing I could get across to kids that were being victimized, it would be tell everyone. Because somebody eventually will listen to you. Tell everybody, but that's hard when you're being victimized. And so it's getting that consent thing. And we talk to parents about, we have Aunt Gertrude coming over, and you've got the little kid, and you say, Aunt Gertrude wants to give you a kiss, and the kid's like, oh, she stinks, or whatever. I don't know what she says about Aunt Gertrude. And we say, yes, you have to give Aunt Gertrude a kiss. Give Aunt Gertrude. No, we have to let our kids make those decisions. Say, I don't feel comfortable with Aunt Gertrude. I am not going to give Aunt Gertrude a kiss. And we say, great, okay, no problem. Sorry, Aunt Gertrude, go brush your teeth. Whatever it is, maybe, I don't know. So it's teaching these kids not so much about stranger danger, but teaching them, how do you know a trustworthy person? Who's trustworthy in our lives? And sometimes for some kids that's easy. Some kids get that, and it's not much of a process. For some kids, to find that person is really challenging. And so this is a journey. This is not something that you can do in a class period or something you can do in a session. It takes a journey to get these kids to understand, yeah, there really are people who want the best for you and who will do everything in their power to make sure that you're safe. So, stages of grooming, you guys know these, and traffickers are great at this. They know exactly how to target the victim. They know how to get that trust. They know how to fill a need. I mean, they are just right there. And what we are seeing a lot is this happening on social media, happening on gaming. And so with our kids, and they're at such a disadvantage, I think, because our kids, we were with a group of sixth graders today. I was with them this morning. And they have never known a time without social media. I mean, they just have never known. And we were trying to explain to them, there is no delete button on the internet. And yes, there is, it's right there. No, there is no delete button. It always stays. It's always there. And so getting them to understand that and understand that, you really don't have to post everything on social media. Did you know you could actually unplug? It's possible. No one has died from not having social media. I don't think it's been on the medical books anywhere. But that's hard for them because that is all they have known. And so traffickers are finding our kids through social media, through online gaming, and they're building relationships with these kiddos. I have had, when I ask kids, tell me what some of the positive things are with social media, they will say, it's a great way to meet people. No, it's a horrible way to meet people. And getting them to understand you should only be friending people that you actually know. And helping our kids navigate that, because that is a huge thing. I worked with a foster dad who was a dad of 5 natural children, fostered a teenager, and she was being groomed through social media. And they took her phone away. They were trying to monitor it. She would just go to the library and get on, and she is actually, the sad part of this story is she just recently stole the car for the 3rd time, left, and he says she's gone. I mean, we can't. So it is just, it's heartbreaking, but this is what's happening. They're good at this, and this is what they're doing with our kids. So what our kids need to know, they need to know the simple stuff, like choices actually have consequences. Good choices have good consequences. Bad choices have bad consequences. It's so simple, but there are these little things that our kids, that if you post a picture of, your naked badoosh, I tell them, made a word that I love to use. If you post a picture of your naked badoosh, that's never going to go away. And so your choices have consequences. This can affect your future. How do you know you're valuable? That's the key. They need to recognize, and again, this is a process for some kids. Do you know how valuable you are? You have an intrinsic value that has nothing to do with anybody else. You are incredibly valuable. And you know who else is valuable? Everybody else. And when you recognize your value, you have a respect for yourself. When you recognize others, you have a respect for them. You require respect for yourself. When you recognize everybody's value, you can't cyberbully them, right? And you certainly cannot sell them. Selling, modern day slavery, all of this stuff is a dehumanization of human beings. We can't have slavery without not recognizing that someone's human. And so that value piece is so key. That's more important than anything else. Knowing who you can trust, unhealthy relationships, they need to know what those look like. Social media safety, we talk a lot about sexting. I had a group of high school kids say, that is so 8th grade. Sexting is so 8th grade. 8th grade, really? That's so sad. Pornography and goals. But our kids are so important, and they've got to be the focus, because this is how we combat it. 1 to 2% of trafficked victims are rescued globally. 1 to 2%. So let's stop it before it starts. Let's get to these kids before we have to even worry about the restoration piece, the medical piece, the victim services. Let's stop it before it starts. 1 to 2 are rescued. Those are scary statistics. These are how our kids are primarily at risk, running away. So homelessness, huge issue. Drugs and gangs. Huge trafficking problem in the gang world. So this is what is some of their vulnerability spots. Unhealthy relationships and social media. These are the big, big things. What the traffickers are finding out about our kids on social media is frightening. I have a video for you that just kind of shows how easy it is to access this information. And not only our kids, but ourselves. We have to be careful ourselves too. The information we post on social media is frightening. And we talk about cyberbullying too, but I know in this political environment, and I don't get political at all, you see the bullying that goes on social media among adults. So how do we get our kids to understand that's not appropriate? You know, we're doing it too. So, and even with, I always say, I just saw one of my girlfriends, and I have to call her, her little baby off to kindergarten, and now I'm trying to figure out why maybe it's her next year's school, I don't know. But she posted a picture of her little baby. Oh, this is her. She's this age and she's going to this school, because I'm right by the school sign. And now I've told all of you how old my daughter is. I've told you where she goes to school. I've told you her name. So you can get all of that information. So when you go and start to build a relationship with her, you already know everything you need to know. Because surely I've accepted some friend requests from people that I do not know. And so with our kids, you know, they have 1,000 followers. I tell them, you have a predator following you. You just do. So here's a video that kind of shows how vulnerable we all are with social media.
Jack Vale, and I wanted to see how easy it would be to get personal information from complete strangers.
I always feel sorry for Jack at the end with that guy who says, thanks for invading our privacy. You put it out there, he didn't do a thing. So that's what our kids are up against. They are totally up against this, where every piece of information is out there, and for them to fully understand that what they're posting makes them incredibly vulnerable, it's hard for them to fully grasp. Gaming is a huge way traffickers are getting their victims. They're talking to people and they're gaming, they're playing a game, and they're having conversations. But what happens is somebody, you know, they're playing this game and somebody asks a seemingly innocent question. So now what city are you in, or what state are you in, or whatever, and they start having a conversation. There was recently a case where a boy who was gaming, mom would come in the room and the gaming guy would talk to her and say, hey, how are you doing, mom? Good, good, good. So mom, he was building a relationship with mom. And then all of a sudden it turned. And he started to turn on mom, he started to turn on the kids. It started getting very ugly. mom got concerned and went to police and decided to start to pursue this because it didn't seem safe. By the time mom got to the guy, they figured out who it was. The guy had asked this boy to meet, and he killed him. And so this is such a critical thing. When we talk to parents, they say, yeah, I only tell my kids that they can only talk about gaming. No, they shouldn't be talking to anybody they don't know. And that's where you can pull out that stranger date. You don't know this person, don't talk to that person. So it's really crazy. And I think one of the things, I think for anybody who's dealing with children, I think this is a key component that you guys probably already know. But it's that always be approachable. One of the things that I say to all the time, traffickers are building incredible networks and incredible relationships. Ours need to be better. They are good at building relationships, we need to build better ones. They are good at building networks, we need to build bigger ones. And so we have got to always be approachable, and we always have to be, and I think approachable with each other. Like Alicia said, we don't always play well together in the same house. But this is for the kids. We've got to do our best to work together and be approachable to those kids. Doing our best to not react. I always tell parents, in those situations, sometimes, it's that Right Guard commercial where the guy is doing a presentation and he's all calm, but inside he's like, I can't believe it! Have you ever freaked out like that inside, internally? And that's what we have to do with these kids. They'll tell us horror stories and we'd be like, and then inside we're freaking out internally. But this is, a lot of times this is their normal. This is what they know. And we've got to know where these kids are at all times, cyber and real. We really do. That sounds so hovering, but we've got to be able to monitor that. And again, helping our kids understand consent. That is so key. Questions about that? All right. Just really quickly, I want to broach on the demand-supply subject. If there were not a demand, we would not have a supply. That's bottom line. And so this is something that we have to do almost internally in our culture, in our community. We've got to change the mindset. We've got to, I talked to the group of kids today about what the media tells us about women, what the media tells us about men, and what we're learning in society, and objectifying women or objectifying men. It's happening all around. We've got to get rid of the demand so that we don't need the supply. And if we are participating in any of that, or we see that, we have to make sure that we are working to get rid of that demand too. And I think that is probably the biggest thing, but this is what our kids need to know too. They need to understand that piece. What questions do you have for either myself or Alicia? These are some numbers, and this is our phone number, Set Me Free project. We are available to answer any questions about, we don't deal with victim services directly, but we are happy to answer any social media questions. We are available to speak at any time to, if you've got a group of youth, if you've got a group of parents in your community, a group of people that you need more information, we want to be available. Everything we do is at no charge because we want that message to be out there. But we are also available as a resource. We can connect you to other resources as well. We have a lot of community partners, so we just want to make sure these kids and families have a place where they can gather information and get help when needed. So, questions? Yes?
Okay, so earlier in the presentation, you talked about these kids that are dropped off in the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Okay, so that happens in my neighborhood all the time, so.
What do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah.
Who do I tell them to go to?
You know, I think that's so this is in part where Alicia's talking about that training with law enforcement. That is coming. We are getting there. Unfortunately, right now, if you were to call 911, they would shoo them away. And that's just a training. What I do, now that's something you could always call those numbers. One of the things I do is I ask them, do you need water? Do you need food? Do you need a phone? And that's what I do. I would also call Polaris Project and Salvation Army. So those are the two things I would do. I think eventually police will have that training in place where they recognize them as victims. Now clearly there are some of those kids out there that are not labor traffic victims. They're there for a different reason. And then there's my kids selling candy bars or whatever. My kids, they're entrepreneurs. They'll go out and start selling stuff, but you can kind of sometimes tell.
So they have the little sign, this is for teens, futures, and things
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is really legit.
Exactly. That's what they mostly. So that's what I would recommend doing is call those phone numbers, Polaris Project, Salvation Army, and ask them if you can feed them, give them water, and a phone. This is the frustrating part about human trafficking, and I'll be so honest with you, it is maddening because we're not there yet. We're getting there. We've got things in place and we're getting there, but human trafficking is about where domestic violence was 15 years ago. We're slowly getting that process, but it's not in place yet. It's coming. It's so close, but there are times where the answer is, unfortunately. And that's one of those situations. Do you want to speak to that at all, Alicia?
Well, I would say too, if there are children involved, it's always a good idea to call CPS.
Yep.
Or make a report so that they have something documented. I mean, there's not a whole lot there, obviously, but they can start to build a case as well. Yeah, I think, not just.
Do you want to come up here
Yeah,
since we're on, that fancy video?
One of the other things that's so maddening about working with this population is people don't identify as victims. So they don't see this as an issue. This is my boyfriend, this is my husband, this is my trafficker. And so even working with somebody to remove themselves from a situation that is just so normal, you really have to take, for adults, self-determination into consideration and work very slowly to help build that trusted relationship and help them see that maybe the situation that they're in isn't very healthy, and help them see that there are alternatives to that situation. So that's also a really maddening part about working.
It is, and a lot of times, that they don't want to be rescued. I mean, that is just the bottom line. I mean, they don't, because they don't understand the situation they're in.
Yeah, we talk a lot about stages of change. So if you're familiar with that, with motivational interviewing, a lot of people are pre-contemplative. They don't see it as a problem. They're making money for their man, or whatever the case may be. But helping work them through those stages of change to get to a point where they realize that maybe this isn't what they want for their life, and help them move toward a different place. Because like the term rescue, I mean, really, they don't feel like they're being rescued. They feel like they're being ripped away from their boyfriend or the person who's been taking care of them, even if it's been basic.
And rescued from what?
Right, exactly.
And they don't
Yeah.
need rescuing. Exactly.
Right, and of course, anytime there's immediate danger, 911. Oh, yeah. What other questions? Well, yeah.
I'm very familiar with stages of change and motivational interviewing, and one of my questions, I think you may have answered it here, but one of my questions was, I'm very familiar with substance abuse and what keeps people tied into that addiction, and but looking at, in this case, where they are putting their lives at risk, every day, with some of them, and just trying to understand what is the motivation for them to continue in that situation. But I think that some of it you just answered, if they don't recognize it as being problematic, if that's all they've known.
Well, and you don't just start from having somebody with really, really healthy boundaries and then end up being trafficked. That's not the way it works. It's
It's a grooming process, it's a very slow process, they're slowly breaking down these barriers, and then all of a sudden, they realize one day that this is the situation that they're in. So there's the grooming process, there's also drug addiction, there's also sex addiction, there's also money addiction, even that fast money. Your only worth is what you're getting paid, because the trafficker is gonna be in your head and telling you that this is your worth now. You have that money addiction. If your only employment option is minimum wage, you're not going to feel fulfilled and like you personally are making your worth, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of that. Also, it's very, very similar to the domestic violence cycle and domestic violence, where it's just domestic violence with steroids, really, the brainwashing and the grooming process. So if you can kind of equate it to that, that's right. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just thinking too, back to the grooming piece. I feel like, you know, what you were talking about early intervention is so key, because I think our kiddos who are in foster care, they associate their worth with a paycheck, right? Money. We start kind of as a society grooming them even early on, you know, that their worth is equal to the money that they get somewhere
Right.
else.
Which is why that value piece is so important. You're absolutely right. I mean, but society does that with adults. I mean, how many, you know, our value is associated to what we do or how much money we make. And I mean, you see that all of the time. And so it really is that culture change even within that scenario, because we need to understand our value, regardless of anything around us, but also everybody else's. So, and I was gonna add to what Alicia said, that's why what you're saying is so critical, because that's where that relationship building comes in. That's why it's so important to be building relationships, because they're not gonna get that the first time. They're not gonna, the 10th time, the 100th time. I mean, they're just not, and so it's gotta be it's a long process.
And I think that's a reflection of our individualistic opposed to collectivism society that every other culture utilizes. But one thing so we're talking a lot about how we identify and stuff, but what is the theoretical approaches that you guys are utilizing when you're working with them? What has showed the most success? What has not?
Trauma-informed care, for sure. We're hammering that home with just about every agency that we talk to, because we don't want to re-traumatize these individuals, and so having a really good basic understanding of trafficking dynamics will really kind of help you toward that. Also, motivational interviewing we found is extremely helpful in just moving people through that process. Therapeutically speaking, not everybody is ready for therapy right away, and so we're almost calling motivational interviewing kind of a pre-therapy to get them ready to feel like this is something that they can handle. Because these are really traumatic stories, really traumatic experiences, and to actually have to open up and talk about that and admit to yourself that these things have happened to you can be re-traumatizing. There's no best practice right now, but some promising models are very similar to what we're seeing with PTSD. So that's, EMDR, trauma-focused CBT. Art therapy is also very helpful, just depending on a person's learning style and when the trauma happens. And those pre-verbal art therapy especially is very helpful.
So there really isn't anything in place as far as intervention. Like, we're on the front lines of homeless services, and we're seeing more and more referrals come in for people who are aging out of the foster care system. But to get that person into the services they need to get rescued from their situation, there really isn't any place to refer them to.
Emergency services is a good one for
Yes,
Yes. Because they serve up to, 24?
And Girls Inc. is actually working on, in combination with some other people, a potential place for kids who are aging out of the foster care system. And so that's Carol's House of Hope is a definite place that houses women, potential families, that would be a great contact. But and that's where I say, this is where it gets frustrating, because it's coming, it's not here yet, you know, we have some resources and, yeah.
Well, and I think really, we're piecemealing this right now, which may or may not be the right way. I mean, right now, obviously, it's what's needed, and so really it's looking at who does what well, and then helping them to see some trafficking dynamics to help them work with that individual a little more effectively. Because, I mean, we want to make sure that we're offering individualized services. So if somebody doesn't really need a whole lot of services that pertain to specialized trafficking issues, we don't want to pigeonhole them into that box. If that makes sense, we want to make sure that they're getting the services they need, and maybe peppering in some trauma-informed stuff with trafficking. But really, we just want the people who meet these needs well to meet these needs. Does that make sense?
Sure. And then, if you came across that, you know, with the homeless population, just you can call us, and we'll help you figure it out. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're absolutely here to walk you through anything. If you want us to meet with you guys, to meet with the survivor, and that's definitely something that we can do in any time as a stopgap until we're open for formalized services. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
Well, you guys are an awesome group. Obviously, you have our phone numbers. If you have any questions because a lot of times, I don't know about you, but it takes me a while to process sometimes, then I think, oh, I wish I would have asked that. Do not hesitate to email us or call us. We are absolutely available to help you in any way. But you guys are doing amazing work, so thank you for what you do, because it's so important. You are making a huge difference. And I will leave you with this quote. This is one of my faves. You may choose to look the other way, but you can never say again that you did not know. And you guys know that, and you guys have chosen to not look the other way, and that's huge. So thank you for what you do, and let's work together and build a partnership here, because that's what it's all about. So. Thank you.